One, and we are live with Kate Ferry and Emily Astry. How are both of you this fine morning?
Great.
Crazy morning. I was disheveled trying to get the
Doing great. Good to be
technology to
here.
work prior, and then both of you were right on time. I had meetings back to back to back, and so I apologize for the delay as we were getting things set up, but glad that it worked out just fine.
Happy to be
Yeah.
here and excited for the conversation.
Yeah, so we were talking, Kate, as a group at Logisolve, we were talking last week about some of the layoffs we're seeing in our customer base of Fortune 1000 companies. I think people are seeing that. Amazon's just announced that they're going to have a large layoff. I can't remember if it's 10,000, 15. It's in the tens of thousands kind of numbers. And we're seeing that all around town. And so we wanted to have a conversation with an expert because there's a process when people get let go. In fact, I have a friend who's a woman who was just let go last week, and she described, it's almost like a death in a way. You get the news, you're a little bit in shock. You feel like you've put a good part of your life and your heart and your soul into your job. I mean, most people, the people that I know and hang out with, that's how they tend to view it. And so there's a process of mourning, coming to grips with what happened, and then figuring out what is going to be done next. And Kate, you have a process, and so would love to hear, what do you find with people when they're laid off? How do people pick up the pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to share. So, one, I was in staffing in corporate for 15 years. So, a lot of the clients that you're talking about, I've experienced over my career. And it's interesting. I was just talking to a gal who was laid off from Alina. And, we saw the Target layoffs. We started to see LinkedIn and everybody lighting posts up, sharing posts about being laid off and supporting those who were. And I think sometimes we also forget that there are other companies in town that are doing maybe not as big a layoffs, but layoffs that are really impacting a lot of people. And so there was just this conversation of, hey, what about me too? I've been laid off, and how do I get support through that? And so after corporate, I left to start my own business because I just saw this need to really help women, one, build confidence, really assess their life holistically, and then tackle the limiting beliefs that are holding them back. And so all three of those come into play when somebody is laid off. I'd love to share a story. I had coffee with a gal, and she was laid off from Cargill. This was a while back, and it was interesting. It didn't hit her right away. She knew the layoff was coming, but one day she was at a doctor's appointment with her child, and she was filling out a form, and on the form it said occupation. And she goes, oh my gosh, for the first time ever, like, what do I put on that line item? Like, I was in HR. That's who I am. That's what I do. Like, do I put stay at home mom? What do I do here? And so the very first thing that I see with women when they are being laid off is that loss of identity. We've put ourselves into our career. We know who we are when we go to work, and what we've accomplished. And so that is a loss, that we're mourning the identity of who we thought we were when we've gone through that layoff. So the first place that I always like to start with women is building our confidence back up, because just because we've lost that job doesn't mean that we have to lose ourselves. Yeah, I'll stop
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Well, I have a quick question because
Yeah.
I come from a generation where, when you lost your job, when you were let go, we called it getting fired. I know
Hmm.
that's not a term people use these days, but it
Yeah.
was a judgment on who you were as a person. It
Yeah.
was a devastating moment in a person's life. Um, and for a lot of people, I think really hard to come back and gain confidence. Is it still viewed that way? It's more common. It seems like it's more accepted, but is it still viewed that way for people, that it's, a judgment on who you are as a person to your core, and you need to go on a retreat to Nepal to soul search to figure out really what you are and what you're going to be, or how do people view it these days?
Yeah, I would say yes. And I think by us, we call it a layoff because the big companies are doing these in masses and things like that. But I think taking the first step in that is taking that ownership of saying, like, yeah, I was fired. and acknowledging it and saying the hard thing that is really hard to say. But I think by doing that, we take some of our own power back, and we start that healing process of being able to say, you know what, I was fired or I was laid off, if you can get there, but recognizing that it isn't necessarily about us. And even in situations where there aren't these massive layoffs and maybe you have been fired, I personally think a lot of times we're just not aligned, right? Like, I believe that most people, all people, are good and want to work hard and want to be recognized for who they truly are. Typically, if we're in a situation where we're being fired, we're being laid off, something wasn't necessarily aligning there for us either. And so I think it's an opportunity to really look at ourselves and go, how do I align myself with where I need to be next so that I don't walk into a similar situation.
And so, talk to me about how you get how do you start getting your confidence back? It sounds like part of the process is acknowledge what happened and then kind of figure out, hey, maybe it was wrong alignment, but I know I'm going to find a place. What are the next steps you take to start to build that confidence so you have that je ne sais quoi when you walk back into an interview the next time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I think you have to go through the grief process. Like, you have to take that time to grieve what was, regardless of whether you've been laid off, regardless of whether you were the one who actually made the decision to leave a company. There's a grief process there because it is what we've known, what we thought we were. I think a lot of us, men and women, put ourselves into our careers. So the first step in all of it is to grieve, to let yourself process through it a little bit. One of the therapists that I bring into my cohorts in my business to talk about are coping skills and coping mechanisms. And there's kind of three buckets. There's a bucket of kind of the numbing, which we all think is like, oh, not a great place to be. It's watching Netflix, scrolling Instagram, things like that. Then there's the kind of self-improvement, and coping mechanisms that really help you process: meditation, journaling, yoga, content that does kind of show that growth area. And then there's the self-care. It's the spa days, it's the, go golfing, it's the kind of take care of yourself. Well, what I love to say and what the therapist has talked about is you have to have some percentage of each of those buckets. 45% in the numbing, 45% in the processing, and then 10% in that self-care. So during that grief process, I would say take that in and kind of use those numbers and those coping skills to kind of grieve the loss of that job. The next part is starting to rebuild that confidence. I am a firm believer that we build confidence through using our strengths, even when they're scary. And a lot of times we don't know what our innate strengths are. So one of the things that I walk women through is actually finding out what those innate strengths are that they have so that they can lean into those moving forward into looking for their next role. We look at it mentally, emotionally, and energetically. So those are three different tools that I use along my 90-day journey to really help women look at those strengths and be able to be proud of the strengths that they have for who they are. I'm a big believer that when you align your strengths, your values, and something that you have a passion for, that is such a sweet spot in both a career and in life. So that would be the second process, is kind of finding those strengths and that support to help you. The third piece of it in building back your confidence, I'm a firm believer that we need community around us. So that is a support system of friends around you or tapping into different coaches and practitioners that can help support you through, that whole entire process of grieving, rebuilding, and then helping you align to what's next.
When it comes to strength assessment, are people good at that, or should you be asking your friends? Should you be asking, should you go out and take an online quiz, or because I've heard psychologists, psychiatrists say people are not good at a self-assessment of their strengths.
Yeah, I agree with that. So the ways that I look at it are through the mental, emotional, and energetic. And what I mean by that is mental. I do have clients go out and take the Myers-Briggs. That's tried and true. It's been there forever. And so we do look at that. We look at the Enneagram from the emotional side of things. The Enneagram really calls out what your core fears and core desires are. And then the third tool I use is a tool called human design, and that's on the energetic side of things. And so by using those three together, it's also the way I have clients take them. So what I always say is take these assessments, any assessment that you do, take them quickly. You don't want to like sit here. The whole thing is our brains want to, only keep us in a place that we've ever known. So when you take an assessment, and I always give the example of the Enneagram, there's a question on there that says, do you think you're better than other people? And of course, you look at that question and immediately you're like, well, yeah, how should I answer this? Because if I say that I'm better than other people, well, that doesn't feel good, but I do feel confident right now. So our brains get in the way of what that, what is truly in our hearts and in our intuition. And so I always say, go through these assessments, take them quickly, read the question, go with your gut instinct, your first answer. If you switch to an answer, go back to that first answer, because whatever's coming up for you innately and intuitively is ultimately what is aligning with us, more than letting our heads really think and assess and decide for ourselves, like, do I think I have that skill, or should I have that skill? So I would agree that they can be kind of, a hard tool to use sometimes if you're not using them appropriately, but all of this is also just a little bit of information for us. And so by looking at ourselves in different ways and holistic ways, I think we can get to the bottom of our innate strengths.
Okay. Emily, you deal with people that are coming from the trauma of this. Do you see things in people where it can be extreme enough where you say, you know what, you probably need to stop and work on your confidence before we get you out in the job market? Or at a practical level, how does this whole thing work to get people to a point where they can go in and really impress when they're meeting people?
Yeah, good question. There are so many talented and good individuals who are on the job market right now. And so what I try to do is just educate people on what that looks like and what the market looks like right now, and help them to understand and realize that they're not alone. This is a journey that a lot of people are currently taking. I think Target laid off, 1,000 or so folks. That's a lot of people in the market right now, let alone, the other corporations who have done the same. And there's a lot of people currently looking who maybe have never had to look in their entire lives. This is the first time that they've, actually applied to a position without knowing somebody, or, having a reference to an organization. The first time that they're using a job board or getting back on LinkedIn and refreshing their search per se. I don't want to steer people in a direction of self-reflection. I want to just educate them on what it looks like right now, for everyone else in the market, that you're not alone, and that the best thing you can do is start getting out there and networking. We maybe have lost a little bit of that since the pandemic. People are working from home. They're not as connected to individuals that they maybe have worked with in the past. So get out there, talk to other people, start having that human interaction again. Do coffees, do lunch. Call up that person you used to work for and ask them for advice, or if they happen to know someone. It really is who you know. Sometimes you do have some really great hard skills, and getting that confidence back and understanding that your skills are valuable and who you are and what you bring to the interview is really valuable. But making sure that you're connected to the right people is really helpful.
I do think who you know still matters a lot. And the other observation I would have, in a really weird way, I think mass layoffs, whatever you want to call them, have helped people and potential employers kind of rationalize that it's not the person a lot of times, it's just the situation. And so because we're coming from a large metro area, we have layoffs of 10,000 people at a time or 2,000 at a time. And so there's not the same stigma. It feels like to me there's not the same stigma in this environment as there was, 40 years ago, maybe, when people were staying at their jobs for 35 years and retiring from one job. It's just a more accepted process that a new CEO comes in, they let 10,000, they don't know who they're even firing. It's just pick, and so yeah. I think that's good. It's never good that people are being let go, but I think hopefully it helps people maintain some bit of confidence, because each of us should be striving to be our best self. And that's hard if the world is hitting you. Yeah,
absolutely. And sometimes you can look at the silver lining. This is a great opportunity to embark on a new journey, get to know yourself again, maybe chase that passion that you weren't sure was the right move or the safe move. Now that you don't have that barrier of the opportunity that you have in hand, you can go out and find the perfect position for you. And maybe it'll be the next best thing. Or maybe it's a short-term opportunity in between when you find that great position. We have long lives in our careers. This is just a blip in that time. So connect with people like Kate and her organization, or connect with recruiters who can help you make those introductions to other good companies.
Yeah, Kate, where, if people want to get a hold of you, if I were a woman, I'd be calling you because I'd love to work on my confidence. I think you can't have too much confidence. I tell my kids, look at the presidents of the United States. I call it confidence of the president. Even when they're wrong, even when everybody hates them, they walk into rooms and they act like they have every answer at all times. And I'm not suggesting you should be like that, but there is an element to the success and the confidence that presidents and CEOs have, that they certainly are living in their own bubble of confidence, which I think is a good thing for probably most people.
Yeah. And a place you want to be when you're walking into that next interview, right? I mean, you've been laid off and you're thinking that you're going to go to an interview. Having that inner confidence and being able to walk in and talk about yourself in a way that shows that, I think is really important as part of this process too.
Yeah. So Kate, do you have a website, or how do people get in touch with you?
I do. Yeah. It's simplybecomeit.com. And there's a place to connect with me there to have a virtual chat. And my 90-day journey is out on the website. I do also have a playbook for people who have been through layoffs and other career transitions that they can do some solo work on, that brings in some of the tools that I use in the 90-day journey and helps them find what those strengths are, what those values are, and what really lights them up, and then pairs that with some prompts that will help them get to that next stage of alignment and finding out what's next for them, whether they want to continue down the corporate path or make a transition. But there's a playbook out there that's really helpful for people in this position.
Kate Farian, Emily Astry, thank you so much for your time today. It's been my pleasure to talk to both of you. A great topic and timely, and have a great rest of your days.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.